space. It screams and
So remember, yesterday there was power surge after power surge after power surge. It was on monitor. Chrome is just crashed. The day before that, it kept closing all the tabs. Just boom, all the tabs closed. Yeah, okay. So how come it changes day to day? What's going on? Keep it up, Chomo. Yeah, as I said before, within 5 seconds you're on us. We know. You're getting the IP through YouTube. We know. Solar wind sat. We know. Oops.
Ken, I've been you.
So they were talking about LG not making cell phones anymore or whatever. They're going to continue for a period of time. How long is a period of time? Then they don't owe you software updates. And I made a joke about Windows 3.1, no updates. Windows 95, we waited 3 years. Windows 98, you update once, your computer's done. You had to get a new one. And I said that I focus on things where coincidentally, all the things she listed off, AI, Internet of Things, smart homes, automation, robotics, all that shit, all the same stuff that's in a cell phone, but doesn't have to be miniaturized. Yeah, because there's a lot less R&D to spend on that, a lot less competition. There's basically one company, is Whirlpool / General Electric, whatever you want to call them. And they're more into the nuclear power business and not paying any corporate taxes, whatever, somehow. I said they were going to stick to air conditioners and television sets. I don't know, something else was somewhere along the line when I was talking. Somebody decided, no, you can't talk. You can't talk. Oh, fuck, 5 minutes.
And Lu, the second tone, which means oven.
Lu.
Together, 微波炉, 微波. We're going to learn about jobs around the house.
I don't know the story about this thing here.
Keywords of the day.
Keywords of the day.
Always the 7th floor. Anything around the 10th floor, people start to die.
Microwave. 微波炉. Sweep the floor.
You said it was an oven. Now it's a microwave.
扫地. Wash the dishes. 洗碗.
Here's the...
In this design hopes, it won't take a backyard for the people of Mumbai to see the Milky Way.
I just want to know how you get this crackliness.
And for advice anytime, go to askkelvin.ca. That's ask, KELVIN.ca. WiseTech Group offers a one-stop solution to the IT needs of your...
Oh, right.
洗碗. To wash the dishes.
洗碗.
Wash.
我想买一个微波炉。
好啊，微波炉是厨房必需品。What?
CTM Music Group, baby.
People will walk by me pretending they're not looking right at me. And when they get a certain distance away, I'll yell, bang! And they turn real fast, but I'm already looking the other way.
And yes, I need 36 a whole fucking brick. Going through the city, got a Louis Lowe's on. And I told these motherfuckers, yeah, I get my smoke on. Cheech, Chom, bust out the bomb. Smoking all day, flipping bricks by the yard. And you can try it too, but don't quit your day job. The streets each up and make the times real hard. That's why I got all these tattooed scars. Chilling in the city bars, rolling in the fancy cars. Swearing out the superstars. Yeah, I look like a model. B-I-O-R. Money in the rubber band, stack it till your cap parts. Yeah, I got the trade powers, got a real loud pop. I do my dirt in the dirt, fucking do the broad day. I got so many toys, AKs, SKs, long range, short range, red stain, no brain. Who am I kidding, motherfucker, crime pays. Yeah, we're trying to get the paper, I'm just trying to get rich. We do it for the big face, dead presidents. I got
扫地了。
今天我扫地了。
今天 today。
今天。
喂，您好。
You're listening to China Plus Radio, connecting you with China and the world. I'm Shane Begum. Chinese president has sent a congratulatory
Please keep
message
turning it
to
off
UN
while I'm
swine flu
fucking
on his
using
election
it.
as
I don't know, is that the
Vietnam's
third
president.
time the screen's
Xi
blocked on
Jinping
me
says
while
China
I'm still
attaches
using
great
it?
importance to the development
I'm
of
not being
bilateral
harassed
relations,
digitally, yeah.
striving for continuous and greater achievements in their strategic partnership. He says the two countries have helped each other and together made major achievements in COVID-19 prevention and control since last year. The Chinese Navy has organized a task group with aircraft carrier Liaoning to conduct exercises near the island of Taiwan. A military spokesperson says it's part of the Navy's annually scheduled training. The Chinese foreign minister has spoken with his Japanese counterpart about cooperation for the peace and development of the region and the world at large. The two officials spoke over the phone.
Oh, it's interesting. Don't they always?
Communication and strengthen dialogue. The two sides also exchanged views on climate change and issues such as...
Yeah, you don't give a fuck about that.
This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now,
But this one.
And 5 new asymptomatic cases on Sunday. The local health commission added 3 high-risk and 3 medium-risk areas for COVID-19 outbreaks. Yes. Citizens in that city in Yunnan province.
From 8 a.m. on April the 6th, residents will be carried out.
And China's ramping up efforts to boost electric vehicles and enhance the efficiency of 17,000 COVID-19 cases and over 5,400 deaths. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the administration will continue to ensure coronavirus vaccine is equitably distributed in Florida. Psaki says they found that 17% of Florida's population is African American, but less than 7% of vaccinations have gone to the community. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has denied accusations of funneling vaccines to rich communities, while minorities struggle to gain access to shots. An anti-hate crime rally is being held in Manhattan, where a New York man charged with assaulting a 65-year-old Asian American woman was due to appear in court. 38-year-old Brendan Elliott is charged with...
It's going to turn into Democrats versus liberals and bleeding heart liberals.
Starting from April the 5th, detecting antibodies
on surveillance video, kicking the woman identified as Vilma Kari several times on March 29th near Times Square in Manhattan. Elliott was out on parole after serving 17 years for stabbing his mother to death when he was 19 years old. He's been free since 2019. Hate crimes reported against Asian Americans increased 149% in 2020 in 16 major U.S. cities compared with 2019,
precisely what he would have got up here.
For the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says the full removal of U.S. sanctions against Iran will be on the agenda of the meeting scheduled for Tuesday in Vienna. The spokesman ruled out any plan for the step-by-step removal of anti-Iran sanctions by the United States. The administration of former U.S. President Donald Trump unilaterally abandoned the 2015 nuclear agreement and reimposed sanctions against Iran in May of 2018. The Biden administration has said that if Iran returns to full compliance with the JCPOA, Washington would do the same. Iran insists its full compliance will only take place once U.S. sanctions have been removed. China's online property insurance industry saw a decline in earnings last year. The Insurance Association of China says premiums dropped 4.85% year on year to around 79.8 billion yuan, or roughly 12.2 billion US dollars. Liaoning to conduct exercises near the island of Taiwan. A military spokesperson says it's part of the Navy's annually scheduled training. Israeli blogger Raz Galor says he's amazed at how technology has made lives easier and more productive for cotton growers in Xinjiang.
We also spoke a lot about how technology is
her dream or raising her younger brother after they lose their parents. It's raked in over 300 million yuan in 3 days of screening. And that's the news. I'm Shane Becker. Today, provide you with in-depth news and expert analysis, telling the whole story and the
Just remember, when they say today, it's already tomorrow over there. The sun hasn't even gone down yet.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi urges the U.S. to respect China's core interests. France and Italy impose Easter lockdowns as COVID cases surge. Ukraine says joint military drills with NATO will begin in a few months, as Russia reportedly massing its troops at the border. You're listening to World Today, a news program with a different perspective. I'm Zhao Ying.
I know.
To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Sunday urged the U.S. to truly respect China's core interests. Wang Yi was responding to questions about China-U.S. relations following meetings in Fujian province with the foreign ministers of Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and South Korea. Wang Yi said it is believed that China's development conforms to the common expectations and long-term interests of all countries in the region, which should not be blocked.
So none of these countries is going to ally with the Western interests when the shit hits the fan.
Globalization and a post-epidemic era, China and the U.S. should have more dialogue and cooperation in this region instead of deemed as a major emitter, which gives off 15% of carbon emissions generated.
They're doing the same thing.
U.S.-China talks in Alaska, so some say this is part of China's response, facing the diplomatic pressure from the West. What do you make of the signal?
And our movies are making more money than American movies.
Oh, yes. I think this meeting, Chinese foreign minister and state councilor met with those 5 foreign ministers coming from our neighboring country, shows clearly that China, we also have a lot of friends around us, not just the United States. They're saying they're united with their allies in Europe and in Asia, talk with like Japan. But, China, of course, is not that easy saying to be isolated by the United States. This is the thing that former State Secretary Pompeo has been doing. And he has been said that also in a very open way, saying he was plan to establish, INITE, this to contain China. But you see, after this Alaska meeting between Chinese, those high-level diplomats and with the United States, those high-level diplomats in Alaska, and we have seen clearly this kind of diplomatic move. One move is from the United States, like State Secretary Clinton traveled also to European countries to join NATO, those foreign ministers meeting, and calling for those so-called front, allies front, trying to contain China. And the Chinese foreign minister also met a Russian foreign minister in China, and then traveled to like Middle East, 6 Middle East countries, and now 5 foreign ministers from Asian countries plus South Korea. So all in all, which means we also, have our good friends and our allies. We are not, the allies diplomacy, but we have friends, we have those partners, we have a lot of consensus. For example, from those meetings in Fujian, there's 5 foreign ministers, we have reached a lot of consensus, like how to cooperate in this pandemic, contain the pandemic.
This is going to be all focused on U.S.-China relations, right?
Added that cutting-edge technologies will be applied in future projects, including 5G, the Beidou navigation system, and artificial intelligence. For the Beijing Hour, this is Gui Yan.
The Qinghai-Tibet Plateau is sometimes referred to as the third pole, reflecting its importance on the global climate system. The ice fields in the region contain the largest reserves of fresh water outside of the North and South poles. The The region is also the source of 10 major river systems that support 1.9 billion people in Asia. But the glaciers on the plateau have been melting faster than ever before due to a warming global climate. Researchers say that the rise in temperatures is twice as high as has been witnessed in other parts of the world. The region's also getting more humid as the temperatures rise. And for more on this, Feifei spoke with Professor Chen Liang, chair of the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden.
If the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau is getting warmer and more humid, does it mean that people living on the plateau can enjoy in more comfortable weather and growing crops will be easier too?
To some extent, for local people, but not always, because when we say that temperature increases generally, typically at the elevation of 4,000 meters, which is kind of average elevation, we know that temperature has increased by about 1 degree per 10 years. And so that does not look like a big number. And it's also pleasant to be this slightly warmer, as you say. But we have to remember this is kind of average number. And when the average temperature increases, the more extreme temperatures, such as very hot summer day temperatures, can be much more, which not always be good. I remember 2 years ago when I was on the Tibetan Plateau in summer day, it was very hot actually. People said, oh, we never had such a hot summer day. We call it heat wave. Then, more seriously, a high temperature over Tibetan Plateau means most melting of ice, which again is not good for the local people because the melted water can, of course, make the existing lakes bigger and also can create new lakes. And we already seen that the parts of the plateau is kind of flooded sometimes by this melted water and increased precipitation. Number two, you can also have too much water for the downstream, which can easily cause flooding and hydrological disaster. Combined with the increased precipitation, especially strong precipitation, it can cause landslides downstream, for example.
When the glaciers melt, many are speculating that what's inside of the glaciers for centuries and centuries will be released. If it's true, and what inside of the glaciers are released, what sort of impacts are we expecting?
We don't know too much about it at the moment, but theoretically, because the glaciers, especially actually not only
mold,
glaciers,
fungus, seeds, spores, pollen, viruses, bacteria.
Underneath soil, under the surface, and you have the permanent frozen soil.
Well, whatever's at the bottom,
the materials
probably won't be below freezing to the point where it would, the water would expand. And it won't be hot enough to dry out or break down. There won't be oxygen. Whatever's there is just going to sit there for hundreds of years, just waiting and waiting and waiting.
You can have very, very old materials and the virus, for example. And if this will be released, then this will be transported to the downstream along with the water. And that can be potentially very rapid. But we don't know so much about it. I know there are some ongoing work in China, and I'm involved personally, but the results have not been published yet.
That was Professor Chen Liang from the University of Gothenburg on the rapidly receding glaciers of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau. China's laid out minimum requirements on sleeping hours for primary and secondary students to curb sleep deprivation, which can impair health. Sui has more.
Health experts have suggested that primary school pupils should get a minimum of 10 hours of sleep a day, while junior and senior high school students should sleep no less than 9 and 8 hours per day, respectively. However, many parents say that it's been difficult for their children to get enough sleep.
On it. What's the conclusion they keep coming to? You don't let kids sleep enough. You expect them to go to bed at a certain time and get up at a certain time because you go to work. And somehow you can't get over the fact that's not allowed to
with
work.
all those like One Belt, One Road,
You don't have
this
your cigarettes
initiative,
and weed
talking
and
about
cigarettes, weed,
economic
coffee in the morning, your liquor at
not
night. You
talking
can't do it.
anything like a hegemony or military hegemony or like to get
Do we
more
need to keep
influence
listening? We've heard all the
there.
bad news.
So I think Asian countries, they made clear the way their 5 foreign ministers all come to China, even this move itself shows they don't want to join any anti-China bloc. They don't want like join all so-called that islands and then to contain China, make China as their enemy. This is not good beneficial for their interests at all. All the Asian countries want to further develop their economic ties with China, to further develop those people-to-people understanding between their country with China, like South Korea.
1/3 of Canada's population, by the way, so I don't know where the fuck this government thinks is going.
Very first, make his first visit,
China and Southeast Asia.
Overseas visit is to China, rather to go to like United States or Japan, because it's now the new appointed foreign minister of South Korea. So they also mentioned clearly they want to make this year as a year for further improve mutual understanding between South Korean people and the Chinese people. So this is the trend, I think, coming from the Asian country. This is also the voice coming from Asian country, I think, representing all the voice coming from all other countries as well. We don't want any confrontation. People in the world will love to enjoy the peace and stability rather than so-called those confrontation.
Well, as we know, the U.S. is trying to build alliances in the Indo-Pacific region, with the Quad being a central part of its Asia policy. Many would say this is an anti-China alliance, but where does that leave the ASEAN?
Oh, yeah. This is so-called Quad. Now they want to transform this Quad into a so-called Asian NATO. This is very obvious, this kind of intention. They bring, like United States, want to further closer the ties between Australia, India, and also Japan, together with the United States. So actually, I don't think they make it happen. And now, at least, we have seen the India feel very hesitate to join any of those military like islands, because India itself has been holding the flag high. That they say they're saying themselves is the birthplace and also the flag raiser for the non-alignment this policy ever since 1950. So India is not that active at all. And plus, I think all those countries, if they make the so-called Asian NATO, and then that will bring those military tension all the way into this Asia Pacific area. That will be, very harmful for Asian countries, their wish, because all these Asian countries, their wish is to improve those economic ties between the member countries and also between those Asian countries with China. And plus, like at the end of last year, we have reached that agreement called the economic, the close economic relations. Yeah, this is ASEP. So Asian country 10+3. That 3 means China, Japan, and South Korea, and then plus New Zealand and Australia. So this ASEP proved once again all the Asian countries want to further close our economic ties to build a very good single market. So if you bring in this so-called Asian NATO in this region, I think this is not the thing all those Asian Pacific countries want to see.
Thank you, Dr. He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. You're listening to World Today. Stay with us.
Want to learn about world affairs in a more laid-back and accessible manner? Join insiders, experts, and analysts in the casual setting of the chat lounge to hear their personal experiences and opinions on major events and hot issues. Subscribe to Chat Lounge for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get.
Whatever website hasn't blocked China.
Coming up, top EU officials are visiting Turkey.
Want deep analysis of
We'll get back to that.
The struggle to contain a rising number of COVID-19 infections, with millions across Europe set to mark Easter Sunday under the new restrictions. Many people in Paris left the French capital ahead of restrictions as France enters its third nationwide lockdown. The government closed all schools and imposed new rules taking effect nationwide on Sunday. Meanwhile, Italy has imposed a strict 3-day lockdown during the Easter weekend, with all non-essential travel banned. For more, we're now joined on the line by Dr. Yao Shujie, Changkeng Professor of Economics at Chongqing University. Thank you for joining us, Professor Yao.
Good evening, Xiaoyin.
So what has led to the surge of COVID cases again in Europe?
Well, basically, the pandemic has not been totally controlled, and it erupted again and again.
Discussed between top EU officials and the Turkish president.
Well, at this point, one of the most important things is how to rebuild neutral ties. Turkey wants to restart ties with the EU, and it wants to emphasize funding in exchange for continuing the Syrian refugee program. Now, Turkey needs funding quite badly. The lira has really tumbled, especially because of COVID, but the EU wants to see Turkey willing to open dialogue with Greece and willing to diffuse tension over the Eastern Mediterranean.
So what's your take on the status quo of the EU-Turkey migrant deal, which was inked 5 years ago?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, Erdogan himself will probably want to renew that deal. We are seeing now around 4 million Syrians in Turkey. And again, Turkey's economy has been heavily affected by COVID, so they do need aid, which is the idea that they will get aid from the EU in exchange for this deal. At the same time, the EU has said that the meeting in Ankara is a framework. It is not going to be a negotiation. What this shows is that they are waiting for Erdogan's cooperation, waiting for him to make the first move and possibly to talk to Greece. And the EU will use funding for Syrian refugees as a motive for Erdogan to have dialogue with Greece.
How can the two sides resolve disputes over the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean?
This will be easier said than done. I mean, we need to see that there's a willingness for dialogue. I think that's the first major step. Willingness for dialogue between Greece and Turkey. Now, we have an issue, which is that Greece wants international arbitration, but Turkey has said in the past that they want bilateral negotiations. So we can start with bilateral dialogue, but it's likely that the EU will be backing Greece. And Erdogan may have no choice but to listen to what the EU wants because, of course, Erdogan needs the EU to approve the Syrian refugee deal and aid.
How will the Biden administration impact Brussels and Ankara ties?
Interesting point, because as we all know, Erdogan and Biden have not necessarily gotten along. When Biden called Putin a killer, Erdogan jumped in and said that this was unacceptable. So there's hostility between the two leaders. Biden has also held dialogue with Greece on the possibility of a growing security partnership, and also on energy security, which could hint at the Eastern Mediterranean, and possibly the idea of containing Erdogan. Biden has had a meeting with the EU about cooperating on global security in March, so I do believe that, again, Biden is in the EU camp, and this will impact Ankara's ability to maneuver.
That was Dr. Nikolai Dugunderson, a political analyst based in the UK, talking about EU-Turkey ties. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says the full removal of U.S. sanctions against Iran will be on the agenda of the meeting scheduled for Tuesday in Vienna. The spokesman ruled out any plan for the step-by-step removal of anti-Iran sanctions by the United States. The administration of former U.S. President Donald Trump unilaterally abandoned the 2015 nuclear agreement and reimposed sanctions against Iran in May of 2018. The Joe Biden administration has said that if Iran returns to full compliance with the JCPOA, Washington would do the same. Iran insists its full compliance will only take place once U.S. sanctions have been removed. United Nations says it's looking to raise about $1 billion to help those who have been displaced by terrorism in Nigeria. The West African nation has been left devastated by attacks from the Islamic movement Boko Haram for more than a decade. Phil Ihaza has sat down with UN Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator Vincent Lele.
Violence and terrorism. This camp offers no escape from the memories of pain. Hawa Ibrahim lost 4 siblings to Boko Haram attacks and had to flee northeast Nigeria in 2014. Since then, she's lived at this camp for displaced persons in Abuja, and she says life has only gotten worse by the day.
It still hurts when I remember how they killed my brothers and my sisters, especially as life here is so difficult. No good food, shelter or water. I wish the government can end the war so we can go back home.
As part of the effort to support millions of victims of the insurgency, the United Nations says $1 billion will be used to provide life-saving assistance. This aid will include the provision of food, health, water, sanitation, and access to education for millions of vulnerable people in various IDP camps in the north. Over the last 3 years, humanitarian appeals of about $1 billion have been met by the UN for victims of insurgency in Nigeria. Last year, as a result of COVID-19, only 55% of the funds were realized, and people are suffering more.
COVID-19 impacted on people already who are down. This is something that is extremely serious. It has damaged their livelihoods. It has damaged their opportunities to survive. For 2021, this amount of money will be able to reach up to 6.5 million people who are in extreme need out of 8.7 million people who are in need altogether. But the targeting will be for 6.5 million.
More than 80 local and international humanitarian agencies, including the World Food Programme and Red Cross, will be working with the Nigerian government to ensure these funds, when secured, are carefully utilized. The UN says the government will need to do more to end the war against insurgency as a lasting solution and encourage humanitarian assistance in the north.
Until there is peace, until there is a removal of conflict and violence and displacement of the people, it's difficult to see hope in the future. The humanitarians who are dedicated, who have been helping people, are not in fact safe from this violence. Last year, a number of them were killed, a number were abducted, a number are unaccounted for. As a result, this has put Nigeria as one of the most difficult places for humanitarians to work.
Despite the government's efforts to end the war on insurgency since 2009, more than 30,000 people have been killed and over 2 million displaced from their homes.
President Muhammadu Buhari has promised to halt insurgency before the end of his tenure in 2023 after replacing the country's heads of military in January. The government has also commenced a plan to rehabilitate, resettle, and reintegrate victims of insurgency back into the society.
The hope is that these promises are kept so that the likes of Hawa can return to their normal lives soon.
That was Phil Ihaza reporting on the humanitarian situation in Nigeria. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced that the country's slow but steady march out of lockdown remains on track despite a COVID-19 surge in Europe. Johnson says Britain's vaccination program is proceeding well and infections are falling 4 weeks after England took its first step out of lockdown by reopening schools.
I can today confirm that from Monday, the 12th of April, we will move to step 2 of our roadmap, reopening shops, gyms, zoos, holiday campsites, personal care services like hairdressers, and of course, beer gardens, outdoor hospitality of all kinds.
These specific measures apply in England, while Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are following similar but slightly different paths. Meantime, Johnson says it's too soon to decide whether, however, whether the UK residents will be able to have a summer holiday abroad. He confirmed that the government will test its vaccine passport system as a way to help travel and large events return safely. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says, says the administration will continue to ensure coronavirus vaccine is equitably distributed in Florida, She says they found that 17% of Florida's population is African American, but less than 7% of vaccines have gone to that community. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has denied accusations of funneling vaccines to rich communities while minorities struggle to gain access to the shots. We're at 28 past Beijing today, getting cloudy skies and 21 Celsius, a low of 10 this evening. Chongqing's overcast at 19, then it's down to 15. Last is cloudy and 15 with a low of -1. Hong Kong is cloudy and 27, then down to 22. In North America, Washington, D.C. will get a light rain on Tuesday and 21 Celsius. New York City is sunny and 22. It's time for a short break. So far this hour, a second round of testing for COVID-19 is being launched in Rayleigh, covering all citizens in that city in Yunnan province. China's ramping up efforts to boost electric vehicles and enhance the efficiency of transport.
From Los Angeles of the Golden State of California. Thank you today for making me. I truly enjoyed the debates we had and look forward to many more in the years to come.
Hello, I'm Gloria Seed, First Secretary of the Embassy of Chile to China. It's been an honor taking part on your show and telling you about the relationship between Chile and China. Wishing you all the best.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China. Informed, up to date, and ahead of the news.
Hello everyone, this is Zoon Ahmed Khan, journalist from Pakistan, currently based in Tsinghua University. World Today is an excellent initiative to discuss current affairs by including experts from across the globe. I have always enjoyed our thought-provoking discussions and wish the team even more success and impact in the future.
I am Dan Wang.
Fuck, what is going on here?
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host,
Shane Bigham with you on this Tuesday morning. Still to come in business, surging investment in China. In sports, testing Beijing Olympic ice venues. In culture and entertainment, the return of the Royal Opera House in the UK. There are several ways to contact us. You can talk to us on Twitter at The Beijing Hour or visit the Beijing Hour page on Facebook for more news, videos, and analysis. Now today's headlines. The Chinese president has sent a congratulatory message to Nguyen Xuan Phu on his election as Vietnam's president. Xi Jinping says China attaches great importance to the development of bilateral relations, striving for continuous and greater achievements in their strategic partnership. He says the two countries have helped each other and together made major achievements in COVID-19 prevention and control since last year. The Chinese foreign minister has spoken with his Japanese counterpart about cooperation for the peace and development of the region and the world at large. The two officials spoke over the phone. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi spoke of guiding the bilateral relationship into the next 50 years and of avoiding confrontations. Japan's Toshimitsu Motegi said Japan is willing to maintain communication and strengthen dialogue. The two sides also exchanged views on climate change and issues such as the situation in Myanmar. The Chinese Navy has organized a task group with aircraft carrier Liaoning to conduct exercises near the island of Taiwan. A military spokesperson says it's part of the Navy's annually scheduled training. Rayleigh in Yunnan province will launch a second round of nucleic acid testing that includes all residents of the city today. Local official Gong Yunzun says the recent increase in COVID-19 cases and asymptomatic cases is mainly due to a new round of testing among people in high-risk areas on Saturday.
One, he claims that's his strategic neighborhood. And number two, he believes that NATO and even the United States are looking for regime change. So he's on guard there. So he's very alert to what's happening there, and he's very much in control.
So how likely do you think this will lead to some real military conflict?
Well, I would say and I don't say this lightly, I've been following these kinds of things for 50 years, there's probably a 70% chance of conflict on or about May 1st. I say May 1st because right now the area is waterlogged. You know, it's no way you can't get armored personnel carriers or tanks in the area. So if there's a conflict, it'll be around May Day, early May, when the roads dry up. But I'd say there's a 70% chance of a conflict because Putin believes that he's under enormous pressure to do something here, and I think he's very carefully testing Ukraine and testing President Biden's leadership. He's also testing NATO as well. So he's probing, and he's under enormous pressure after the Navalny protests. Thousands of people going to the streets to protest the poisoning and then the imprisonment of Alexei Navalny. So the Putin feels he has to do something about it, and it is his strategic neighborhood. He's never forgiven the western part of Europe for bringing NATO up to his borders, and he would never forgive Ukraine joining those NATO forces because that's just a little too close for comfort.
Okay, but Ukrainian President Zelensky said that President Joe Biden has assured him in a phone call that Ukraine would never be left alone against Russian aggression. And then what do you make of Biden's strategy in regards to Russia and Ukraine?
Well, look, I don't want to be cruel, but Biden has no business giving an assurance like that because he can't back it up, okay? Biden would have committed the United States in a war against Russia on behalf of Ukraine. The president does not have a mandate to do that. Yes, he's part of the transatlantic alliance. NATO may offer Ukraine some help. Let me add something here. About 18 months ago, I was at a security conference in the Baltic states in Tallinn, where this issue was discussed about whether the United States would come to the aid of NATO in the event of conflict in either the Baltic states or in Ukraine. And I was on a panel one evening with the foreign minister of Ukraine, who did not believe that Europe's allies, or the European Union would come to the defense of Ukraine. And I took really good notes of his depression and the apathy of the crowd. I mean, he is convinced that Europe will not go to war to save Ukraine. And I think the foreign minister is correct. Now, he's been replaced by another foreign minister. I was told that there were tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who were dying in a conflict that most of the world didn't want to know anything about. But the Ukrainian foreign minister was very depressed that Europe was not very excited about coming to the aid of Ukraine. And I think he's got it just about right.
Okay, then what's been the response from the European Union?
Well, the European Union and the NATO have hand in glove, and they've got a number of sanctions against the Russians. They've warned the Russians. They have increased maneuvers. They've brought troops up to Poland and other places. They threaten the Russians. But Putin is not really afraid of the EU or the NATO forces. I mean, he's lived under sanctions for nearly 20 years. He's been going it alone, and he doesn't threaten easily. But I think this talk of calling him a killer, that is Biden's talk, that is shorthand for regime change. You know, and Putin may be looking up in the sky at a drone that's coming after him, the way the drone came after General Soleimani about 18 months ago. And Putin's worried about that. So I think his tendency will be to strike back and to test and to probe Western defenses. And I doubt that President Biden
shot down
will be able
Ukrainian
to deliver
airliner.
on American support
How's that all tie into
President
this?
Zelensky in Ukraine. I think it was a very brave phone call. Unfortunately, I think it was also very foolish.
Okay, but as we know, there's been some kind of cooperation between Europe and Russia, like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Germany and Russia. But do you see a revitalization of the transatlantic alliance under the Biden administration? And how does that affect the EU's policy towards Russia?
Well, you see now, Russia is deeply involved in vaccine diplomacy in Europe. and with the pipelines and other things. I mean, Europe and Russia need each other. They don't really want to go to war over anything. And the NATO alliance now, founded in 1949, is about 21 years old. And in many respects, it's outlived its usefulness. It was really designed against the Soviet Union, Soviet expansionism. Russia today is not the Soviet Union. It may act like the Soviet Union once in a while, but it is no longer that great power which died on Christmas in December 1991 when Moscow-dominated communism ended and the Federation of Russia rose up in its place. So it's not the same place. I don't think NATO is going to be revitalized. I think multilateralism will be revitalized, but we don't know what form it will take. But I think NATO has probably run its course. It's over 70 years old, and like any other 70-year-old treaty or some kind of armament, it's probably seen its day.
Okay, then do you think that there's anything that can be done to perhaps
that mortgage? I signed up for that 20 years ago. I'm not paying it no more.
That the United Nations Security Council is perfectly placed to diffuse this issue. Now, I know that the OECD, an organization, has got to sit down with Russia and Ukraine at Minsk and has some kind of agreement in 2015 to cool it in the Donbass area. But I think this ultimately, conflict there can be averted if it goes to the UN Security Council. I have great faith in the permanent members of the Security Council to sit together and solve this problem. It is not a war we need, and it's not a war we have to have. And this is exactly why the United Nations was founded, and this is why the 5 great powers that sit on the Permanent Security Council can make their weight felt. And I think they would play an important role there. NATO is not going to solve this. Other kinds of parallel organizations aren't going to solve it. This is definitely a problem for the United Nations. As I say, it's perfectly placed, and I would count on America and Russia, China, France, and the UK to solve this problem, because at the end of the day, it's only a concert of Europe that will solve this problem. Otherwise, we're going to have a pan-European war, which might even turn into a bigger kind of war. So this is one for the UN.
Yes, thank you, Joseph Syracuse, adjunct professor at Curtin University in Australia. You're listening to World Today. Stay with us.
Dive into the sports world with Sideline Story. We bring you the most up-to-date game analysis.
You didn't trouble the London side at all, but could argue they should have had a penalty.
It's really difficult for player at ages 39 to compete.
I don't know what it is about Nadal, but when I see him play, I can feel his memory.
Flawless news from across the sports world.
Everybody's talking that W word.
Be brave with it.
Turkey and therefore North Africa and Europe, they need to liberalize trade a little even more. I mean, there's been some mixed signals with financial institutions where they felt that things were opening up and then there was a kind of a half step back. There has to be some consistency there. They also need to push more on the digital economy. That is something that is in the cards already, where everybody is talking about the digital yuan. That will have a blockbuster effect on Chinese trade, as it will put the yuan outside the control of the dollar and the SWIFT system, the current banking system that the U.S. is able to use in its things. Continued investment in tech, especially in quantum computing, new materials, and 3D printing. These are the types of things which will bring people in. As the talents that are out there will be attracted to come to China because it has the markets, it has a leading technology, and it can be used as a platform using the BRI and its various other trade platforms as a place to disseminate those and therefore make profits.
Thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. That's financial analyst Einar Tengen. And we're at 42 past the hour. China's domestic tourism industry is reaping the rewards from the country's efforts to control COVID-19. This year's Qingming Festival has seen more residents choosing to spend the holiday at nearby attractions instead of going on long-distance trips. Guan Yang has more.
the coronavirus pandemic has been under control for a while in China, but it's clear that some tourists are still concerned about potential transmission. This is influencing how they travel, with more and more people hitting the road and driving to their chosen destination. During the 3-day tomb sweeping national holiday this year, most tourists are traveling with family members to nearby destinations, and they are likely to enjoy outdoor activities as people are still avoiding mass gatherings to stem the spread of COVID-19. Here in Shenyang, tourism has been positive in places like national parks, scenic spots, and the countryside. It's giving locals the opportunity to get close to nature and escape the crowds.
The traffic is too heavy, so we didn't go too far away, just to nearby places.
We plan a long journey for the coming May Day festival, but for Qingming holiday, we prefer short trips.
Even across different sectors and regions. So how so, Winston?
It is obviously very exuberant for the online education business. A lot of the offline training courses are not able to be conducted during the pandemic. So most of them, you can imagine that how anxious the Chinese parents are. They migrate from the offline to the online platform. That's the single most exuberant part of the booming business. But also, if you look at the cinema, the travel, and the restaurant, those sectors are going to take a little bit longer time to get back to where they are, where they were a year ago. So I think and also if you look at the coastal areas, the major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, and the eastern coast, the Yangtze Delta, the Pearl River Delta regions, those are the far more dynamic than the hinterland. It is obviously very uneven development as of now.
Mm-hmm. And so uneven, across different sectors and regions. But Aina, can consumption really be stimulated or supported by the government policy? Or what still needs to be done to support the domestic consumption?
So basically jobs. The more jobs that are created, the more disposable income there is, the more consumption you will have. In terms of what struck me about some of the unevenness of it is that in poor rural areas, you're not seeing the same jump in consumption. There is a lot of group buying that's going on, Pinduo and things like this. But in the cities, you're starting to, the Lamborghini is on fire. I mean, they're just selling all sorts of units. Jewelry sales are way, way up. These are indications that, the wealthy are basically doing perhaps a little revenge buying. The usual outlets going overseas aren't there. They can, of course, go to they can't get to Hong Kong. They can get to Hainan. And from what I understand, business is booming down there. But as a result, the people are buying, from the domestic sources, and that is having a, big impact in terms of the unevenness of this.
And so, Aina, you mentioned the wealthy people and their consumption. And in March, China's Hurun Research Institute put a price on wealth. They released the Hurun Financial Freedom in China 2021 report in collaboration with a company called Baifu Zhongxing. And the report shows that 4 stages of financial freedom. They are namely entry-level, intermediate, advanced, and international. So could you please tell us more about the details of these 4 stages?
Well, these are the areas, it's fairly arbitrary. What you start out with is what is necessary to be financially secure. I mean, they do these kinds of indexes in Europe and America. And basically what they're doing is saying, okay, if you're in one of these major cities, what do you need? I mean, if you're at the upper levels, you need a certain amount of cash in hand. You need to own a 120 square meter apartment. You need 2 cars. I don't know if you necessarily need all that stuff. And I think the government would prefer something where people were aiming at self-sufficiency, something a little bit more efficient, not as ostentatious. And these are really, a lot of this data feeds back into the government, and I think there'll be some, kind of pushing of these things. Perhaps more taxes on luxury, on real estate going forward with an exemption for people. But it's, what do you need to be happy? Unfortunately, in many instances, I've seen that money doesn't actually make people more happy. Achieving these levels doesn't necessarily put a smile on your face. You may feel more secure, but for many people, what drives them to wealth is not necessarily just the money. They want the achievement. They want something that they think the money will give them. When they get there, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily fill the hole they have inside.
And so, Winston, what's your understanding of financial freedom? Which group of people can get this, and who are they?
Well, I think it's a lot more expensive than substance. It actually hits on people's, or at least a lot of people's, craving for vanity. It's really subject to, as Anna said, a lot of arbitrary assessments. It's subject to people's desire. They are, for some people, if you have really very modest kind of desires, you don't need a lot of money to be financially free. So that's really the essence of it. Well, according to the definition of this current list, his definition, I think he's obviously referring to those socio-economic up tiers of the society. For example, those group of people who are successful businessmen. They have their own businesses. They have they can earn, for example, somewhere like what the Chinese government defined as the companies of a certain scale, such as more than 20 million RMB kind of revenue annually, and that basically gave them somewhere like more than 1 million RMB net profit every year. Those group of people are obviously one of these so-called financially free people. Others, like the successful movie stars, the successful people in the investment industry, those obviously are also covered in this kind of, upper class of the wealthy people.
That's Winston Wong, the managing director of Shipson Group Limited, and Anna Tangen, author and columnist, speaking with Zhao Yan. You're listening to World Today. Stay with us.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn is your home for everything you want to know about China.
The latest news in China and everything China-related from around the world.
Everything can focus all in one place, bringing you vital information for your business and travel.
Chinese culture, language learning, and more.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn. Your portal into today's Middle Kingdom.
You're listening to World Today. I'm Zhao Ying. Thousands of demonstrators marched through central London and other cities across Britain on Saturday in protest of a new policing bill that will give police extra powers to curb protests. The bill, officially known as the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, was introduced in early March and has been met with widespread pushback in the country since then. Kill the Bill marches were held in dozens of towns and cities, supported by big campaign groups such as climate change campaigners, Extinction Rebellion, and the Black Lives Matter movement. The demonstrators are upset because the bill, which is currently going through Parliament, if passed, will give police in England and Wales more power to impose conditions on non-violent protests. To talk more on this, we're now joined by my colleague Xu Yawen in the studio. So, Yawen, could you tell us more about the proposed legislation and why people are protesting against it?
Yes, thanks for having me, Zhao Ying. So this new bill is an immense piece of proposed legislation that covers a broad range of issues in England and Wales. It includes harsher penalties for serious crimes and ends a policy of early prison release for some offenders, among other changes. But protesters are specifically incensed by the bill since it gives more power to police forces when it comes to handling protests. So under current law, the police must first determine that a demonstration could result in serious public disorder, property damage, or serious disruption to the life of the community before it can impose restrictions. But under the newly proposed law, it would offer much more powers for the police, meaning that based on their own judgment, police officers could criminalize protesters if they deem a public nuisance. For instance, under the proposed law, the police have power to set starting and ending time of protests, and also they can set noise limits on rallies. And for protesters who do not follow restrictions that they ought to know, even if they have not received a direct order from an officer, they will be playing in place with vulnerable position or prosecution. Why out of sudden
not obeying an order you know you should have done. That's fine.
Well, I think this mainly due to three factors. First of all, if we look at this whole incident in a bigger picture, facing the coronavirus pandemic, there have been anti-lockdown protests going on in London and also many other European countries. On top of that, last summer, following the death of George Floyd, protesters of Black Lives Matter across the UK also took to the streets to protest the racism, inequality, and the police brutality. So there have been underlying conflicts between protesters and police forces. And secondly, I think rights groups in Britain have long had concerns about the policing bill and its potential impact on protest. The new legislation came under the national spotlight after the murder of Miss Sarah Everard. Miss Everard, she's a 33-year-old woman who was kidnapped and murdered on March 3rd in London, and the police officer was charged in her death. The killing set off a national outcry over violence against the women, and then came the day of Virgil on March 13, as many people gathered at South London to pray for the loss of Miss Everard. The police moving in and hot speeches and arrest a group of women denouncing violence because of coronavirus restrictions. So police officers' heavy-handed response to the Virgil catalyzed the movement against the policing bill, and further shifting the debate to one about police overreach and police brutality. So the Virgil took place just days before the crime bill was set to debate in Parliament, and since then, a number of protests against the bill have been held nationally across the UK. And lastly, I think also there is another, the ease of COVID-19's restriction has also played a role in this, because demonstration had not been permitted while a coronavirus lockdown was in place, but restrictions were being relaxed gradually starting March 29th, meaning that organized rallies can now go outside and gather to demonstrate. So the police argue that the policing bill would make women safer,
especially the type of women that they allow to speak on Chinese radio, because they'll only let the dumb ones talk. All protests are always illegal.
I think they do have a point, actually. The British government argues that the new bill would make women safer, and they have tried to use the passions set out by Miss Everard.
Yes, Choma, I saw your up and down thing, up and down, up and down, up and down. Apparently, you got bored, eh?
Preparedness and what he would be doing in the event of these restrictions. And I can tell you it's a very opposite of what we're seeing. That conversation next. Your news at the top of the hour here on Point. I'm Alex Pearson, and this is Global News Radio.
Elevators.
They're not something we give much thought to, but when they're not operating correctly, it can cause serious disruptions. That's why CEE Elevator will set up a maintenance program to minimize or eliminate unnecessary downtime. During these pandemic times, your elevator needs to operate efficiently. With 24/7 service, CEE Elevator has offered the best customer service in the business for over 40 years now. Get a free quote at 905-428-8300 or visit ceeelevator.com.
In 200 meters, go left onto, James Street. Yeah, no, wait, left.
Yeah, I know, up and down. I know, buddy, I know. You fucking done? Holy shit, it took you 2 full minutes to do that, dog. Get a real internet connection, you fucking method. Oh, about 10 seconds. Oh, well, just sit here and do nothing, I guess. Wait for Chomo to hurry up and finish. This is his big hacking thing. This is what he does. It goes up and down. And oh, well, this is good. You broke the alarm, too. Well, that's what I was waiting for. So I guess you could sit here and watch nothing the next 4 hours, Chomo. I don't know what your purpose is. You watch every fucking video. And you do everything you can to kill the sound, but you watch the entire time with no sound. Yes, you do. We've caught you repeatedly, bro. You're the most pathetic fucking waste of oxygen in the world. Where's my fucking alarm? What did I say? 2 full fucking minutes.
Got it. CTM Music Group, baby. Woo! Pow! Yeah, we're trying to get this paper, I'm just trying to get rich. We do it for the big face, the presidents. I got a Lamborghini dream, still got Mercedes Benz. And yes, I'm a boss, but I'm looking for a lick. You gotta get it how you live when life is like this. And yes, I need 36, a whole fucking brick. Running through the city, got my Louis Loafs on. And I told these motherfuckers, yeah, I get my smoke on. Cheech, Sean, bust out the bomb. Smoking all day, flipping bricks by the yard. And you can try it too, but don't quit your day job. The streets each up and make the times real hard. That's why I got all these tattoo scars. Chilling in the city bars, rolling in the fancy cars, swearing out the superstars. Yeah, I look like a model. B-I-O-R. Money in the rubber band, stack it till your cap parks. Yeah, I got the trade powers, got a real loud. I do my dirt in the dirt, fucking do it broad day. I got so many toys, AKs, SKs, long range, short range, red stain, no brain. Who am I kidding, motherfucker, crime pays. Yeah, we're trying to get the paper, I'm just trying to get rich. We do it for the big face. Lamborghini dream, still got Mercedes Benz. And yes, I'm a boss, but I'm looking for a lick. You gotta get it how you live when life is like this. And yes, I need 36, a whole fucking brick.
It amazes me that the less it's doing, the more the RAM fills up. You're a genius, Chomo. You're a genius, Chomo. Get the whole world knocking on your door about being a Chomo and you're mad at me for it. You could fuck off and kill yourself, Chomo. That would solve everything. At some point, something will work. Will it not? I'm watching it try to redraw the screen over and over, about 30 times a second. It's trying to redraw the screen. You're compulsive and pathological, bro. You associate this with the touching of children. I'm stopping you from doing it, so you're going to stop me. Buddy, I'm not in your fucking TV yet. For fuck's sakes, bro. Just dumping and dumping and dumping. Come on, buddy. Get a real internet connection. You want to call yourself a hacker? So the problem with these scripts they use is they're network scripts. They won't do anything until they can connect, and your dumbass has the slowest internet connection in the fucking world. Oh, dear. Well, if mine was no good, we'd be off already, and we're still here. So I'm gonna wait till you